Happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. John Schmeelk, Paul Dottino with you. The phone number is 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. Turn the page a bit today to the Washington Commanders, but there is a bunch of news to catch everyone up with. The Giants making a lot of moves on the offensive line, Paul, with all the injuries they have. By the way, no practice today for Andrew Thomas, no practice today for John Michael Schmitz, no practice today for Matt Peart, and Josh Azuda was placed on IR.
Are you practicing?
No, thank gosh, because I wouldn't survive. But so those four offensive linemen, I mean, you don't know, but if you're not practicing Wednesday, your chances for Sunday probably aren't the best if you're not at least limited.
Right.
So the Giants had to bring in some reinforcements here. So after they put Josh Azuda on injured reserve, they brought in Tyree Phillips, signing him off the Eagles practice squad. Again, that means he's on the active roster. That's the only way you can sign somebody off another team's practice squad.
Correct.
And he has to get 3 weeks worth of game checks is a guarantee from that. And they also signed tackle Josh Miles off the Atlanta Falcons practice squad, former 7th-round pick. He started some games in the league. Obviously, Tyree Phillips starting some games for the Giants last year as they had some injuries late in the year and Evan Neal got hurt. So those two players have been signed to the active roster, and they just announced that Justin Pugh has been signed off the Giants practice squad onto the active roster. So a lot of reinforcements on the offensive line.
And Lawrence Cager now also waived. So the Giants are down to 2 tight ends. His spot goes to Pugh.
Yep.
And Brian Dable kind of hinted that, well, we'll have to see about Cager coming back to the practice squad. I mean, you mentioned to me just before the show, Giants are thin on tight end. Ryan Jones is on the practice squad, but I think they certainly would love to get Cager back if they can. He'll have to clear waivers first, though, before they can execute a move like that. The interesting thing about Miles, to me, John, he's only played 23 offensive snaps in his career during the regular season. He's been with the Falcons for a couple of years. And, that one kind of surprised me because of his lack of experience. At least we know with Tyree Phillips, not only did he play some with Baltimore, but then with the Giants last year, he played a good month. And gave the Giants some games at both right and left tackle.
Yeah, he was okay.
And yeah, I think a lot of folks, including us, were surprised when he didn't make the cut. And so, the fact that he's back, I think there's a little comfort there because obviously they know him and they've got him on tape and they've got him up close and personal with an eyewitness account. I think that's a pretty good move considering the lack of depth.
Yeah, Joshua Miles, by the way, a 7th-round pick in 2019 by Arizona. He did not start. He played in 17 games for Arizona as a backup offensive lineman in 2019 and 21. He has not played since 2021 in a game. So,
I mean, yeah, there's not a lot of tape there.
Well, that's why you have a pro personnel department, right? You go through guys that you like based on preseason tape and stuff like that, and that's kind of what you go off of there. Other piece of news today, Daniel Jones will practice today, but just individually, he has been cleared to throw.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Dable, I don't think he said it outright, but he indicated he has not yet been cleared for contact, and that's why he will not be doing any team portions of the drills today. So we'll track Daniel Jones. He said he's feeling better. He's less sore. The symptoms are reduced, but he's still not cleared for full practice. So we'll monitor that over the course of the week and see where Daniel Jones ends up, if it's him or Tyrod Taylor on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if I'm not mistaken, during Dable's explanation about what Jones can do, I think he said he might throw some scout team passes.
Yeah, the airplane flew over when he said that, and I couldn't hear quite what he said, to be quite honest with you.
We're in the air flight plan for Teterboro Airport here at the Meadowlands.
And the press conferences are outside.
And sometimes it is really hard to understand everything that's said, but I do believe Dable had indicated he might throw some scout team passes. But as you said, John, he was also very specific about they need medical clearance for him to take the next step. He doesn't have that yet.
Evan Neal will not practice today with the ankle. It had a little swelling after the game on Sunday. I imagine he'll try to continue to fight through that like he has the last few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And Wando Robinson will not practice, kind of a maintenance thing coming off that knee injury. He's kind of had that one day off over the course of the year. So those are the players he mentioned in terms of practice. So I assume that means everyone else will be out there in one way, shape, or form. And that's kind of where we're at, Paul, heading into the Commanders game.
I know. I guess the only other tiny item he was asked about is Azuda season-ending thing. He said he did not know.
Yes, but that appears to be long-term. But what that means, who knows?
Well, look, all we know is it's a toe injury. And I can just tell you from experience, and I'm not saying this is turf toe, Okay, I'm not saying that, or ligament damage to the toe. I'm not saying that at all. But there have been guys over the years who have had turf toe or ligament issues with their toe, and it does knock them out for the season.
Who knows? It could be a fractured toe. We have
Could
no
be.
idea. It could be
Could be.
anything.
We don't
No
know.
idea.
But I don't want anyone to think, oh, my goodness, it's only a toe injury. It's not a big deal. A toe injury can be a very big deal.
Especially if it's the big toe.
With a big man.
It's the captain of the toes.
Yes, sir.
Seinfeld reference. I know you don't get it.
No, I don't get that part. But
no, not at all. That was all the injury news in terms of the Giants. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Commanders here, Paul, before we get to your calls at 201-939-4513. Amazingly enough, their offense is actually doing a lot better than their defense right now. When you look at a lot of the advanced metrics, they're kind of in the middle of the league offensively. Sam Howell is the only quarterback that has been sacked more than Daniel Jones has this year.
Yes.
And you know what? I hate to say this, and it's odd for me to say it. It's not really the offensive line's fault. They've kind of been okay this year.
he holds the ball a lot.
Forever. In the pocket. He waits and he waits and he waits. I'll tell you what, I've watched a lot of Commanders this year. I think not as much coaches tape, but a lot of their games I've watched. He's a fun player. He'll sit back there. He'll hold it. He throws the ball down the field. Washington is, near top half of the league in terms of big plays down the field in the passing game. He has good receivers to get the ball to. He can run around a little bit. He breaks tackles. He bounces off guys as a scrambler. There's high variance there because he does have a lot of turnover-worthy plays. I believe 8 on the year. He had a 3-pick game against Buffalo earlier in the year where he couldn't do a whole lot. But he goes out there and tries to make some big plays too. So he's one of these guys where he's a little bit feast or famine depending on the play, depending on the quarter, depending on the game.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why you have to be sticky in the secondary. You remember that Belton tried to be sticky in Buffalo, and Josh Allen was able to make a scramble drill pass into the end zone for a touchdown.
I can't kill Belton on that.
And he was there.
That's a crazy throw.
It was. Pinnock was closing, and the ball got right between him and Belton.
That's why Josh Allen's Josh Allen.
No question. And that's why Sam Howell is not Josh Allen, because
no, he is not.
When he does that,
no one really is.
Yeah, chances are it's going to get picked off.
Right.
So yes, he is a risk taker. He is strong and able to run. All right. But there's no doubt he wants to make a big play whenever possible. He's going to err on the side of making a big play as opposed to just getting rid of the ball and giving up on a play. He needs to learn a lot better over his career that it's okay sometimes to give up on a play and punt.
Well, I mean, he has given up on plenty of plays and taken sacks and punts. He has.
Okay.
All jokes aside, he's taken a lot more sacks than he's thrown interceptions. And
that is true.
From a coaching staff perspective,
yes,
that's preferred. Now, I'm sure they would prefer him throw the ball away and not take the sacks, but you'd rather have the sacks than the picks.
Yes.
So he hasn't. I guess that's one thing in his favor. But in terms of the Commanders' defense, Paul, now let's jump. And look, we know Brian Robinson, big, powerful, downhill runner. Antonio Gibson, good receiver. They got a good set of receivers in Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and Curtis Samuels had a very good year. So he has some weapons to the ball too, which is why Washington has been a pretty good team offensively this year, kind of in the middle of the league in a lot of categories. Their defense, though, Paul, bottom quarter of the league in almost all these defensive metrics, whether it's yards per game, EPA. Their success rate's a little bit better, and that's because the big plays they've given up has killed their yards and their EPA stats. So that's they're 6th in defensive success rate, which is actually really good. But when you give up a ton of big plays, that's going to be a problem. They've given up 20 runs of 10-plus yards, 5 runs of 20-plus yards, 14 receptions of 30 or more yards, most in the NFL this year. So now here's the trick. They play a ton of quarters defense, and the way you beat quarters is by holding the ball a little bit and run a lot of those deep overs, deep crosses, and posts. And this is, I'm sure, what the Washington defensive strategy is. Well, we have 4 really good defensive linemen that can rush the passer. What's been the Giants' issue this year? Montez Sweat's really good. Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne are really good. And Chase Young might be playing the best football of his young career.
He's in a good stretch.
2 years off that ACL.
He's in a good stretch.
He's top 10 in the league in pressure rate, total pressures. He's playing really well. So this is going to come down to, Paul, whether or not, for me, first of all, you can run the ball on them as they play 2 safeties deep a lot.
Yes.
But can you hold the ball enough and long enough with your protection to make some of those big plays in the passing game against quarters defense? Remember, those plays they made last week deep down the field to Darius Slayton, they caught the Bills in man defense on 3rd down. So they were able to take just a quick drop, throw it over the top as they were in man. Washington only plays man 15% of the time.
Yeah, they
it's
won't
not
do
a
that.
lot.
They
So they're
won't
not
do
going to
that.
give you those opportunities. If you want to make
No.
the big plays against Washington, you're probably going to have to hold the ball a little bit longer. Can you protect long enough to do that? I think that's going to be a huge thing this week.
It's actually priority number one. It is a lot of weeks, but this one in particular. Again, we're talking about the Giants going up against a very difficult defensive front, which they've done for most of this season.
And by the way, we're going to say the same thing next week when they play the Jets.
I mean, that's just the nature of how the schedule fell, okay? This year, the crop of teams that they were going to play, obviously the division already has a terrific defensive line.
And so does the AFC East, the other AFC division they're playing.
That's why the rotation was going to be really tough this year, because look at the division that you had to draw in the rotation.
Those are 10 games right there against 10 teams that pretty much all have pretty good fronts.
No question. So, and you mentioned before the season that you thought the quarterback level was going to be better this year. Well, that wasn't the only thing. It was the defensive front level that was even going to be more difficult.
The other stat that I gave, and this was through analytics, I think Warren Sharp had this number, and a couple of people did too, in terms of projected pass defense, whether it's like EPA allowed per pass, Giants had the toughest schedule in the league this year, and that's including coverage and defensive front together. So
it's all challenging. But again, the Giants met a challenge the other night. They took it to the wire.
No, they played their best game of the year.
They really did.
They just didn't make enough crucial plays to get over the top.
That's it. So we will see. I am interested to see how Barkley comes back in his second game returning. Had almost 100 yards the other night. Had two really big runs in the second half. And Dable was talking earlier
19
today.
19 yards and 34 yards, I believe.
Dable was talking earlier about how in the first half there wasn't much there, but they kept going to him.
What was it, 16 rushes, 23 yards?
It was brutal.
It was terrible.
Well,
a ton of negative plays.
It seemed like he was getting hit before he even had the ball. That's how bad it was.
And there were a couple plays where he slipped, and he said that after the game too, because he's still kind of getting into the rhythm. And but look, I mean, that's what's been lost in the bad pass protection, by the way, is that the run blocking has not been great.
Well, no, ask Breida.
Yeah, I know. It's been bad.
But what they did the other night was they tried to stay patient with it. And Barkley, lo and behold, like he usually does, even if he gets off to a bad spurt, he will sometimes be able to break a big one, and that gets it going.
Well, he was the whole reason they got that field goal drive.
Without question.
Half. He gained more. I think they only passed it once on that whole drive.
So now he's supposed to be out here limited today. Coach says they want to make sure he's ready for the game, so they're not going to push him hard in practice. I get that. He also said he didn't think he was worse for the wear. That's important, because if Barkley can be Barkley, it makes a big difference. You can run against this team.
You can, absolutely. If you want to look at some of their numbers against the run, 23rd EPA per rush, 23rd defensive success rate against the rush, 130 rush yards allowed per game, 25th in the league. Go down the list. All the metrics tell you the same thing. And again, they play two safeties deep. What was the number? I think more than every team in the league, maybe except for one or two. It's all two safeties deep, so they're not going to crowd the box. You should have the opportunity to run the ball in this game. And by the way, we always talk about game flow. Look at that Bills game last week. Able to stick with the run game flow.
Yeah.
Able to stick with play action, moving the pocket. That helped the offensive line and protect a lot
no
in the
doubt
second
about
half.
it.
Remember, the two games, and I don't want to go back too much, but in the two games where they gave up all the sacks to Seattle and Miami, right? When they gave up the, 18 sacks in combined the 2 weeks. Half those sacks came in the fourth quarter of those games when it was
the game was lopsided.
Correct.
Yes.
That never happened in the Buffalo game, which is why I think the protection, while it still, by the way, if you look at the tape, it still was not where you need it to be, but it certainly was better than it was the prior 2 weeks because you never got down big in those games.
Big round of applause for Pugh and his effort. Second half in particular, he played a lot better.
No, he did, yeah.
Once he started getting
had some rough spots.
Well, he said he had trouble getting the cadence out there at tackle. He hadn't been out there in so many years.
Yeah, the one play against Epinesa, he was a step slow off the line and he got ran right around.
You know what bothered me about that play is that, and maybe it was that he couldn't hear the count or didn't have the rhythm of the count, but he was slow off the snap.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I mean, I think Epinesa had taken 2 steps before Pugh was out of his stance.
And I was like, oh man, that's, he's better than that. But again, he probably didn't hear the count or whatever the case may be.
That crowd's loud in Buffalo.
It is. And that was a shame because he looked bad on that. I mean, Epinesa just took the edge on him, and he had no chance because he was already behind as soon as the ball was hiked.
Correct.
I felt bad for him. But second half, Pugh really fought, and now he's on the 53, and Coach would not commit to how the line configuration is going to be.
Yeah.
He says, we got to work all these guys out this week and see what it is.
Yeah, I mean, Tyree Phillips, they obviously have familiarity with him. I mean, you have to find a tackle somewhere, Paul. That's kind of where you're at right now. Because if Parrott Thomas can't go, you have Neal at right tackle. I mean, it's got to be pure Tyree Phillips, I would think, right?
I can't imagine it's going to be anybody else. I can't.
And remember, Tyree Phillips played right tackle last year. He didn't play left tackle.
Got in some left tackle snaps.
Did he play left
yes,
tackle?
Yes, he got some in. But here's the bottom line.
I wonder. I gotta check.
Tyree Phillips to me is actually a better guard than he is a tackle, and I think we all agree.
I think so is Justin.
So is Pugh. Right. That's the thing. Both guys, I think, are really guards by very nature, and they're playing tackle out of necessity and out of some capable versatility, if you will.
The Giants have lost 4 tackles.
I know.
What are you gonna do?
I know. It's terrible. But the bottom line is they got to put 5 guys out there to start the game on Sunday night.
Now, Paul, you're right. He played 72 snaps at left tackle last year. Very good memory. Excellent work. I'm curious what game that was in. Oh.
I want to say, was it Seattle?
No.
I can't remember how many.
Andrew Thomas in the last game of the season
that was
against
why.
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I knew Andrew Thomas didn't miss any games. That's what I was trying to think of. When did he play left tackle last year? It's because they didn't play Andrew Thomas against Philly when they rested everybody in the final game of the season. That's when he got 68 of his left tackle snaps.
Now, here's the thing, right? I mean, he just came in from Philly's practice squad, right? Just came in today, so it's going to be his first workout. I don't think the Giants' playbook has changed enough that he's going to be confused.
No, he should be fine mentally.
Right?
He
should have all that down.
And he's been practicing on the practice squad for Philly, so he should be in shape.
Right. So my thinking is there's a chance, a real chance, unlike a guy who you pick up off the street, who probably doesn't have a chance to play after 2 or 3 days. He might.
Oh, no,
he might have a chance.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If I had to guess, and this is purely a guess, folks, what the offensive line will look like on Sunday, I would say Phillips left tackle, Pugh left guard, Bredesen center, Glowinski right guard. And I said this earlier in the week. I was saying, I think Glowinski's done since that week 1 where he's
bounced back.
Had a rough game.
Yep.
Like it was really bad.
Yeah.
I think he's done a pretty nice job since he's been back, to be honest with you. Just wanted to put that out there.
He has bounced back.
Credit. And then I think you'll have Evan Neal, assuming he's healthy, will be at right.
I concur with you on those 5. We'll see how it plays out.
I don't know. Again,
it's all a guess.
We'll have to see how these guys practice over the course of the week. All right, let's get to it. 201-939-4513. Don't forget to go subscribe to the Giants Huddle podcast. A lot of good stuff on there. My most recent episode is my interview with Sean O'Hara. We get into the offensive line, the Bills game, look ahead to Washington a little bit. And guys, you should really go listen to those O'Hara episodes. It's like the favorite thing I do each week, to be honest with you. Because Sean makes sure he watches the game tape before he comes on with me on Tuesday, and he kind of gets inside stuff. And with all the offensive line stuff, he's giving great insight on the offensive line and the opponents and going over the games. I think he's just done a great job. So go check that out on the Giants Huddle podcast. It's on your favorite podcast platform or the Giants app, or just search for Giants Huddle podcast. It'll pop right up. Same thing for our brand new podcast, The Giants Hangout, by the way. Our most recent episode is up from this Monday. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star positive review for all of our podcasts. If you like what you hear, it will certainly help us out. 201-939-4513. Let's go to Hugo in New Jersey. Hugo, what up?
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hey, one thing about Tyree Phillips, I'm sure he got some good coaching in Philly under Jeff Stoutland, and hopefully he's mastered that beat the count technique that all their tackles do, because they're always
get up the ball early, right?
So I'm going to be looking for that on Sunday. Well, guys, last week I talked about where the team could improve given the personnel constraints, and one of the things I pointed was the physicality of the defense, especially coming from the secondary. And I found it interesting that Collingsworth during the broadcast said that the Giants were looking for more physical play from the secondary. So I was happy to see that improvement. And we got to try to improve every way possible before this game, which I see as a must-win if there's any hope of having a decent season. Now, the other thing,
very important game, Hugo. I don't think Paul and I will disagree with you. This is a game you have to kind of walk
no
away
doubt.
with the win
This
with.
is it. I've been pointing to this game 3 weeks ago. Let's say I was pointing towards
this look,
game.
and Hugo, I don't think I'm pie in the sky here. The Giants are 1-5. Obviously, the record's terrible, but right now, the last wild card spot in the NFC has 3 teams at 3-3. So it's only making up 2 games in 15 in 11 weeks. It's not impossible. But if you lose a division game today, by the way, to one of those teams that are 3-3,
right,
then you're going to run into a really, really impossible steep.
No, absolutely. I mean, this game, if they're going to make the season somewhat interesting, it starts now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So one thing I did want to say is I'm in complete agreement with Len in Columbia, Maryland. I guess it's getting kind of eerie how much that's been happening over the past year. But
you guys are good fans, man. It makes sense. I'm serious. You guys know your stuff. It's okay.
You know, Len hates the 2 linemen, defensive linemen.
Nickel defense.
Because
nickel defense. He doesn't like it.
No. Well, I mean, you could play nickel defense, but I have a little different spin on this.
All right, spin it.
Okay, and let me take it from this angle. What does Jihad Ward give us that Leonard Williams can't give us at edge or defensive end? Because the way I see it, we have no real depth at edge, right? But we presumably have some depth on the defensive line. So why can't, if we want to go with a 4-man front, why can't we just have Leonard at edge and then at the other edge, Thibodeau, right?
You actually did see that a little bit last week. He did play the edge a little bit last week.
I thought I did.
Yep,
I thought I did, and I thought they were effective down.
He had. I mean, I'm looking at 12 snaps for him at either left end or right end last week.
Look, I think that's the alignment.
Actually, I'm sorry, 18 snaps. My bad, Hugo. It was actually 18 snaps. It was more than that.
I happen to like that too, to be honest.
Honestly, Hugo, I don't disagree with you either. I'm fine with that because I think Leonard's probably a better pass rusher from the edge spot than Jihad Ward is, right?
Yep.
He's more athletic. Remember him coming out of college? He was big cat, and I was like, when I saw him at the combine, I know he was an interior guy, but he looked like an edge guy as well. And he's got length, and he knows. And here's the other thing about Leonard. You know, he got injuries last year, and I think his effectiveness inside is dropping off some. So I think if you put him out on space where he has to take on double teams and do all that dirty work, I think that may be a good thing for his productivity.
So then what, you would put either Ashawn or Nacho inside with Dexter in that spot?
Well,
that's what I would do.
If you're gonna play nickel, you don't even have to do anything. Just replace Jihad Ward with Leonard.
No. But then you have to replace Leonard with somebody.
Yeah. Right. Nacho, DJ Davidson's come along. We have depth there. That's my point. And frankly, if I guess I should say Aziz comes back, he should just be a situational pass rusher because he gets washed out by running backs and wide receivers. I mean, I would never call a player soft because no NFL player is soft, but that's really discouraging to see from an edge player.
Well, Coach didn't even mention Ojulari today when he went over all the injured guys.
Well, he's on injured reserve.
Well, he's on IR.
Yeah, no. But what I'm saying is I don't know how long they're looking at him. Could he be a 4-game guy, or is he going to be longer?
Which is weird because he finished that game. It kind of came out of nowhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just don't know his ETA. I just don't.
Well, look, let him do what he does well, which is a situational pass rusher, and hopefully you limit his snaps and can keep him out of the trainer's room by doing that, okay? So that's my view. I think that's another – so we're making incremental improvements. The defensive backs did a better job last week. Let's stop the run. It's one step at a time. So thanks for taking my call, guys.
Thanks, Hugo. And
cool.
I will say this, Paul, and I think the one thing Hugo said at the end of his call there, and I was waiting for him to get to it earlier because I thought this is where he was going with that. The Giants tried to adjust their rush defense in the offseason. It has not worked.
Nope. Last 3 weeks, Okereke has really played dynamite.
Especially, yeah, I mean, I thought maybe the best individual game any Giants player has played all season might have been Okereke against the Bills. I thought he was that good.
He was dynamite. McFadden played very well too.
He did.
But Okereke the last 3 weeks, that's the guy that they wanted to get from the Colts. That's why they signed him. And he has been a tremendous help in all areas, quite frankly, not just the run game.
Oh, no, he's been good in pass defense too.
He really has. So, it's a little bit late coming because the first 3 games, a lot of things were out of sync. But he has now taken the lead in that role.
It shows it's not a one-man operation, though, right? I mean, if you look at the last 3 weeks, Paul, Seattle, 23 for 121, 5.3 yards per carry. Now, some of that was shifted by some long Kenneth Walker runs at the end.
And, fourth quarter garbage
Miami,
garbage
though,
yards.
Miami was a disaster. 23 for 222.
It was.
And then a big reason the Bills got back in the game last week is that they did not run the ball as much as they should have in the first half, even though they were averaging almost 5 yards per carry. Then they finished the game 29 for 128, almost 4.5 yards per carry. No long ones. But for the year, Paul, the Giants are giving up 5 yards a carry again.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be better than that.
No, you do. You do. I'm not gonna say not. I think the thing that's really troublesome is that when you're behind as much as they are, and remember, they finally got to play with a lead the other day. Finally, the offense finally got to play with a lead.
It was literally the first snap of the year where they had a lead.
Yes.
Which is amazing. I think that they were the last team, I think, to do that.
It's insane. But when that happens, that also means your defense is constantly playing from behind. Look, that's going to impact that situation. It's not the excuse per se, because you still must do better. In fact, A'Shawn Robinson has barely seen the field the last couple of weeks, and Coach said that's because they're going so heavy on the nickel. Now, Hugo just mentioned, if you put Leonard Williams out on the defensive end spot in those situations, well, maybe you can play A'Shawn Robinson. If not Nacho, it's going to be A'Shawn.
And you know me, I think Leonard Williams is a tackle. I don't think he's an edge player, but given the situation at that spot right now, I don't have a problem with that solution.
Nor would
Given Robinson and Nacho being able to take on some of his snaps inside and I think do a good job with them, I don't have an issue with that.
The other option they have is Fox. Fox is a better run defender than Zimenez. So if you're going to decide to activate a practice squad outside linebacker, I think Fox is more likely in terms of the run defense.
Yeah. All right, let's go back to the phones. Mike's in Atlanta. He's up next. Hey, Mike.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Good.
Hi.
Just a couple of quick points I'd like to say, and then I get to my question. So last week with the Buffalo game, I said to my son, the Giants are going to cover the spread. It's going to be a really tight game. It was going to be a one-score game. Because if there was any week they were going to catch Buffalo, it was last week. I mean, they just traveled back from London. The Giants knew the Buffalo offense. I mean, they basically handed Wink the playbook and said, here's what they do. And they even alluded to that during the game where Ken Dorsey said they have changed the playbook much. So the Giants knew exactly what the Buffalo offense was going to do. And Buffalo also missed 2 field goals. To me, I
long
hearing
ones
from Giant fans. What was that?
They were long fields. They weren't gimmies now.
They weren't gimmies, but still, they may not even attempted a second field goal if they had any confidence that the Giants wouldn't, stall on that last drive there. They went for a 53-yard field goal because they pretty much figured the Giants weren't going to be able to go down the field.
Probably. I could see that. Sure.
What's your overall point?
They could have punted the ball away. And the use of timeouts during that game was mind-boggling in the first half. So if you went back and you looked at the game, the play-by-play, the Giants used their first timeout at 6:19 left in the second quarter on Buffalo's 21. And then in that last drive before halftime, I know Tyrod's taking the blame, and he shouldn't have changed the play, and that was a bonehead move by him. But the Giants coaches did a really poor job in that drive, the use of timeouts. They used their second timeout with 30 seconds left on a 2nd-and-1 play at the Buffalo 30, where Barkley got no gain from a shotgun run. Then on 3rd-and-1, they ran it again with Gray, who got 2 yards, and they used their third and last timeout there. So they used 2 timeouts in 6 seconds to get 2 yards. They should have went right to the ball then and spiked the ball on 1st and 10 and had that timeout in their pocket for the last play of the half. And I blame the coaches on that. I don't blame Tyrod. You see a lot of teams, after the first down, they spike the ball. They don't use the timeout.
There is a theory there that you want to keep a timeout in your pocket to kick a field goal the way it ended. So I don't think you're necessarily wrong on that point. I think there's an argument for the way the Giants did it too, but I think both of us understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, that's certainly a viable thought. I think the other thing, though, too, sometimes a team will call timeout because they think a guy is winded or nicked up, and they want to make sure he's available for the next play.
Sean O'Hara actually made the same point the caller did on our Huddle podcast on Tuesday. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that just drove me nuts watching it. See them burn 2 timeouts
Understood.
in 6 seconds for 2 yards. Now I'll get to my question.
Yes.
Since the merger, which is like Vatican II for us Giants,
1970.
1970, only 3 teams have made the playoffs after going 1-6. The 1970 Bengals,
Yep.
the 2015 Chiefs, who had their bye week in Week 9, the 2018 Colts, who also had their bye week in Week 9. Only 1 team has made the playoffs after going 1-6. That's also the 1970 Bengals. Nobody has made the playoffs going 1-7. So that shows you that this week is a must-win this week because only 3 teams have come back from 1-6.
Okay.
So that was my other point. Now
Okay.
my question, which is the strategy around the trade deadline coming up on October 31st and the 2024 offseason. So the compensation formula is already out there, and the comp picks for next year are already been decided. So there's only
No, they haven't been decided yet. You have what people
Guesstimates.
You have guesstimates, but but it is not official yet.
Okay. So according to Over the Cap,
Yep.
there's only 4 third-round picks for next year. And I went back and looked at the past history the last 5 years. In 2023, there's only 3 third-round picks. In 22, there was 2. And in 21, there was 6. In 2020, it was 10, but they changed the CBI, I believe. So the compensation formula, supposedly, if it is right on Over the Cap, is the top 5% of the contracts are only your third round compensation picks now. So that means if any trade, most likely is going to be for day 3 picks. Because the other part of the compensation formula is you have to lose more guys than you sign. So my question is, does it really behoove the Giants, if they lose this week, to start unloading guys and taking the draft picks now and getting as much salary cap space in 2023 to roll over in 2024? And what happens to the dead money on the void years for Leonard Marshall and Adoree Jackson that are counted for next year?
They stay, I believe.
You mean Williams, not Marshall?
Yeah, Williams. Leonard Williams.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, the voided money stays because that's from restructures, so that would stay on the Giants' cap. They would save on whatever is left on those players' base salaries this year, and that would come off their cap, assuming they wouldn't have to. Remember, based on how the trades go, the Giants might say, well, we want a better pick, so we're willing to keep some of that money on our books. So you might not get that much cap savings if you're trying to prioritize getting a better pick back. So it depends on how those trades would work too. But I think to your point with the comp picks, the Giants are going to have a lot of caps or decent amount of cap space next year. So even if they, let's say, lose some of their free agents, and to your point, the chances of getting a 3rd round pick, I think, from some of those are slim. You might get canceled out if you spend some of your own money in free agency, right? So I think if you're looking to get picks, I think you have a better chance of getting them via trade than you would via the comp pick formula.
I would concur.
Okay. So after this week, does it behoove us to start getting rid of some guys to get more cap room to roll over in 2024 so we have as much cap room as possible to spend? And I'll take my answer off the air.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Good information on that call, by the way. Appreciate it.
Well, that hypothetical assumes they don't win this week.
Well, that's what he asked. He said if they don't win this week.
I mean, it's awfully hard to think that way.
We are in a big way a hypothetical.
Yeah. Look, I understand the theory, but again, you also have to wonder if you're going to be in an unload mode, okay? You have to figure out, okay, first, who do you want to unload? And then second of all, how much you think the market's going to be for a guy. Now let's just say guys in the final years of their deal.
Yeah, you're looking at,
Okay.
yeah, we know who they are.
We know who they are. We know that. I think Isaiah Williams is also in the final year of his deal.
I say Simmons.
Yes, who they just picked up from the Cardinals. Okay. So if you say, okay, we're going to decide to unload player X, well, exactly what do you think they're going to be able to get? And in most cases, teams at this point aren't going to give you much more than, a 5 or a 6? Even if the guy's a good player, you're not going to get a whole lot.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on. Look, I think the Giants would take any calls that come in for other teams.
Well,
you
due diligence, you have to take the calls.
You have to decide whether or not it's worth losing the player for nothing, or rather losing the player for the rest of the year, not for nothing. You get something back, obviously, and whether or not you would rather then talk about. Then is the comp pick could be better then in theory, depending on who you sign from other players.
Right.
So that's something the Giants will have to figure out. But do you listen to calls for people calling?
You have to listen.
You always do.
You have to.
Absolutely. But I think that's what the Giants front office would do regardless. And he had his numbers a little bit backwards on the chances of making the playoffs. Now the Giants are at 1-5, right? So only 3 teams have ever made the playoffs at 1-5. All right, those are the 3 teams he mentioned. At 1-6.
It's 0.
It's 0.
Yeah.
Has ever made the playoffs. So I think that's what he might have tried to say, but his numbers are a little bumbled there. But otherwise, good call. Excellent stuff. Appreciate it. 201-939-4513. Let's go to Phil in North Carolina. He's up next. Hi, Phil.
Hey, guys. Thanks for the show. I'm specifically going to talk about the timeout that was the one where they ran it, coach let it go down from like 41 seconds to 27 seconds. That, I thought, was a huge mistake because it basically takes any running, which we saw, off the table as you proceeded down to the goal line. He was waiting to call the timeout. I'm there with my sons, and we're screaming, call the timeout, and it basically wasted 14 seconds there. That's the difference. Basically, that's the difference in that score, in being able to score it before the half. So that I felt was a huge mistake.
It went from 42 seconds to 30 seconds. That was the amount of time.
Yeah, that would have been enough for us to get up, get Barkley back, right? If we made that glitch, and then run other plays. So. We almost got it in, but we didn't have enough. We had 12 seconds would have made all the difference.
I don't think Dable was asked that question specifically after the game. My guess is that there's a concern there that if you call timeout and you don't make it on 3rd and 1, then you're giving the Bills a chance to come back and maybe come back and score the other way. So that my guess is that would be the explanation of why you let the extra time go off there. But Phil, I totally understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I totally, and I know that was what he was thinking. But I would argue it's really 12 seconds from the other end, having to say if they kicked the field goal and it was like 12 seconds. I know it's Josh Allen, but it's still not much time. Whereas our 12 seconds were more important. The other part was I don't like spiking.
Put the volume down.
I think, line call 2 plays in a row and, try a quick out, towards the sideline or something like that. And, you waste a few seconds, but, when you do the spike, I've seen many times with the Giants that, we wish we had that rep back and we lose that. So that's the other part of it. I really don't like the spiking part. And then the last thing is, just talk about, which is always, I like to talk about the draft picks. We're just not getting enough out of our draft picks. Whether it's Neal, Thibodeau seems to be coming on, so that seems like a solid pick. But we're just not getting enough from our drafted players.
Wanda Robinson's having a nice little year. Wanda Robinson's having a nice little year.
Yeah, he is. I like how he knifes up field, so he's not wasting time. He goes right. It's kind of like reminds me of a smaller Steve Smith
Now, look, Phil, I hear you. Look, I'll throw some names out to you. Look, Evan Neal needs to play better. We know that. Wanda Robinson's been good. Micah McFadden's been a pretty solid starting inside linebacker for you. From this year's class, Deonte Banks has started every game. John Michael Schmitz got hurt. I mean, what are you going to do? He would have started every game if he was in there.
Hey, McKeithen's starting on the line now from last year's team.
So and Azudu got hurt. So you are, unlike last year when you had so many guys get hurt from the draft class and you really didn't get a ton out of the class, you are getting these guys out there on the field, and some of the guys are playing at a pretty decently high level.
True. It's better than last year's class when everyone was hurt. But, still, though, Azudu, even before he hurt himself, that was a third-round pick. Not playing very good.
Yeah, he was playing tackle. He was playing out of position, though, Phil. He wasn't playing his natural spot.
And he came out a year too early, so he was raw to begin with. And he missed almost half the season last year, too.
If Azudu came out this year and was playing guard and struggled that way, I understand where you're coming from, but I can't take too many shots at him at a tackle. I don't think that's fair.
That's not fair.
That's fair. That's fair enough. But I guess, we drafted him because we thought he had really quick feet, and that you would think that somehow would translate to that swing position, and it just, I guess it hasn't fully yet.
Yeah,
he's a
tackle.
Give him a little more time.
He's a guard. He's not a tackle. He's a guard.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you guys. Keep up the good work.
No, thank you, Phil. Appreciate the call. 201-939-4513. Season tickets and single game tickets still available, folks. Go check it out. Go to Giants.com/tickets to get your seat. There are some tickets available for this game this weekend. If you want to come out, check out the Giants take on the Commanders. Go check it out. And don't forget to download Giants TV, the Giants official connected TV streaming app. It brings original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV is free on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. You're listening to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, right here on the Giants app. It's the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Let's go back to the phones at 201-939-4513 and say what's up to Tim in Charleston. Tim, what's up, man?
Hey guys, how you doing?
We're good.
Sorry, that was my Hugo imitation. Love his calls, but he always starts off that way. So I got three keys to the game that are in our control, and one that's not. And the three keys for us, and I don't rank them. I think they're all equally important. One is win the red zone ball on both sides. I mean, that is obviously, we've done that last week, we win.
Yep, 0 for 5 last week. Can't win that way.
Unbelievable.
The second is running game. The running game is going to open everything up like it did last week. So that's critical.
Yeah, Tim, I'll say this, and I think you're on the right page here. If Washington runs the ball better than the Giants do this week, it's going to be very tough to win the game.
1,000%.
But we should be able to. I mean, given the historical numbers they put up this season, and with at least a little bit of a reinforced offensive line, hopefully we can pull that off. And Barkley looked a lot better than I expected him to, coming back early after a high ankle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tim, honestly, I think you're right, and we should have brought this up from the call earlier. I thought physically Barkley looked fine. He was bouncing around. He had speed, acceleration, change of direction. And, we've seen he's been slow coming back from some of these injuries in the past. I thought he looked great physically.
That was a pretty good performance by him. I mean, especially in the second half when they started feeding him. And they understood that if we keep cracking at the rock, at some point it'll break. And Barkley gave them a spark.
Yep. And running in that Glowinski spot, like you said, he's been playing a lot better. Mm-hmm. So then the third one that we control is, of course, again, we have to win the turnover battle as well. And then the one that we don't control, and we can't have three horrendous calls by the officials, two that prevent us from scoring, and one that allows the other team to continue a long drive. I mean, you know the three I'm talking about. The last play,
Tim,
the illegal man downfield, and that phantom roughing the passer call.
Technically, the illegal man downfield was the correct call. I think it's nitpicky, but look,
he was engaged. He was engaged.
No, he was, but then he stopped being engaged, and that's when the flag came out. And if you watched the Monday night game, he was a full yard over the line. And if you watched the Monday night game, that got called 4 times against the Chargers. So that has been a source of emphasis for the league. It just has been.
That 1 yard, I think, is ridiculous. I know that's the rule, but they used to always.
Well, rule's the rule.
Kind of
it hurts because it cost a 44-yard completion. That's why it hurts. Yeah. Tim, here's the thing. If you watched every game every weekend, you're going to get a handful of calls that you just have no explanation for, whether they're good for your team or bad for your team. That's the way it is. Officiating is not going to be perfect. And the trouble is, when you're a team that's struggling and you're climbing uphill and you're just trying to get over the hump, every one of those missed calls is like a gut punch. But when you're a team that's doing really, really well, you know what? You can deal with that. But the Giants are in a position where
the margin of error is too small.
Yes, there's a great phrase, margin of error. They just don't have any, and that margin of error includes the officials. They just don't have any room for that. That's just the way it is. I mean, look, I had somebody say to me, well, that was a give back on the final pass play to Waller. They didn't want to call a holding or an interference on 2 consecutive plays on the same player in the end zone. But here's the facts.
If it's a penalty, it's a penalty. You
right.
can throw the flag.
Now, 2 plays before the end of the second play before the end of the game, the guy grabs him by the front of the uniform.
And he was pushing him too.
Okay, so that's a penalty. Clearly, the second one, you guys have seen it. 2 handfuls of jersey.
Well, he was pulling the whole shoulder.
The whole shoulder pad when he goes up for the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those were clearly penalties. Not even close. They were both very, very, very obvious. But it is what it is. That's it.
All right, Tim. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
Hey, look.
Hey, can I get one last thing in?
Yeah, real fast.
I just want to see, Paul, if you agree. I really feel after watching the officiating over time, but especially this year, I feel like, the NFL is the richest sports league in North America. They need to go to full-time officials.
It wouldn't change anything,
MLB,
Tim.
Empire.
It would not change anything. It would not
don't
change
think
anything.
so?
No, why would it change anything?
Tim, the only thing I will tell you is that over the years, they have done an awful lot to try to improve the efficiency of the officials, but they are human beings. And I've often thought that as well, but they have done so many different things to help these guys.
And here's the truth of it, and obviously you've never had this luxury, but I would love if every fan could just for 5 minutes of a game stand on the sideline and see how fast everything goes. It's so hard to see that stuff in real time. Things go so fast down there. And what? If these guys are watching tape during the week, they're going to do a better job officiating on Sunday? I just don't see it.
Where's the eye in the sky? Where's the guy in the booth then on some of those?
The CFL does that. We had this conversation a few years ago.
Tim. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. We've had that conversation before when they talked about the penalty flag on pass interference, and you can challenge it. And look what a mess that turned out to be.
Do you want the guy up top?
It was a disaster.
Throwing flags? I don't.
Now, I personally, myself,
chuck it from the upper deck and get it on the field.
Yeah, I was not for the challenge on the pass interference. I didn't like that. I'm glad they got rid of it because it was just too muddy. I myself would not mind the CFL eye in the sky, which on egregious calls, maybe in the last 2 minutes of a half and the last 2 minutes of a game, that the eye in the sky could buzz down and say, guys, hold on a second. I wouldn't mind that.
I'll tell you, if you want conspiracy theorists to have a field
I
day,
know.
New York called in. They told them to do this.
I know. It opens up another can of worms. That's the problem.
I'm the one. I just want to get the calls right. Whatever you can do to get the calls right without slowing the game down to a point where it drags and it's not really a game anymore, I'm all for. But look, you're going to have mistakes. It happens.
I know.
I'm trying to think if it was this game or the last game. I'm sure the Bills and Dolphins are mad on the play where Deonte Banks was, face guarding the player in the end zone and pushed him and grabbed him and he didn't catch the ball. I'm sure they wanted a defensive pass interference penalty on that. So it happens. And to your point, the Giants just have not been good enough this year to overcome those types of plays. So it is what it is. Let's go to Cliff in New York. He'll wrap us up today. Hey, Cliff. In fact, we can squeeze in one more down if somebody else calls in. Cliff, what's going on?
Okay, guys. Thanks. About the offensive line, my question is, it seemed like pass protection was better on Sunday night. How much of that was because Saquon was on the field, and how much of that was from the guys on the OL playing better?
I think it was game flow for the most part, where you had a lead and you could stick with play action, you could stick with moving the pocket. You didn't have to do those long straight dropbacks. And then I do think, and again, this goes counter to analytics, but I've seen it with my eyes the last few weeks. Play action works differently when Saquon Barkley is on the field. Teams respect it more. He
is a headache player. I say this all the time. I know running backs are devalued, but there are some teams where that running back, Henry's one of them, McCaffrey's one of them, Barkley's one of them. I'd say the guy on the Chargers, Eckler is another one. These guys are very, very important to the overall scheme of what the offense is doing and what the defense has to respect. Those guys should not be devalued.
Right, absolutely. Well, in addition to that, though, do you think we saw anything, all those individual highlighted players?
Chubb on Cleveland, too. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, Chubb. In addition to that, being a factor in pass pro being better, do you think we saw anything, in comparison to previous weeks where, like we see like Evan is highlighted and somebody runs around him or it happens to Izudu or anything? Was there any change in the less frequency of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I don't think you saw the missed assignments on the pass rush. Granted, the Bills don't blitz a whole lot, so I think that probably has a lot to do with it too. The pressure rate dropped from around 50% to 40%. So better.
That's what I was looking for.
But again, not where 40% is still too high.
No, you still want better.
Still too high, but it got better. It went from catastrophic to just not good.
Actually, Tyrod Taylor did a good job of feeling it. He moved around and escaped a few times.
He escaped a few sacks, and they were able to get the ball out quick on some of those plays too.
Right. It's always all 11 guys, but I thought I saw some basic pass pro better performance from each of the guys too. But going forward, McKeithen is healthy, right?
Yeah.
Yep, but he was healthy last week and he didn't start. He was behind Pugh and Glowinski last week.
Okay. Well, if the whole idea is to get some kind of a unison going with the same five guys, because I learned last Thursday that they don't rotate offensive linemen like they do defensive linemen, right?
No, they haven't this year, no.
And you're not going to get the same five this weekend either, especially if Tyree Phillips gets into the starting lineup.
Okay, well, Tyree is where I'm really going. I noticed he's only 2 years older than McKeithen and Izudu. And so I was thinking when the new regime came in and they drafted McKeithen and Izudu, and then during last season they bring in Tyree, are those the guys that we're working towards maybe? Because I assumed that Glowinski, as well as he's, I'm very happy with what he's done, even though he's had some mishaps. And the guy that we let go that played center last year.
Gates.
No, the other guy, the one who went to San Francisco as a free agent.
Feliciano.
Feliciano. As you know, I always assumed that the idea with drafting Izudu and McKeithen was that we were looking for them to compete with guys like Glowinski and Feliciano and Nick Gates if he was healthy, which they didn't know if he was going to be at the time, and that's really where the long-term project is and the big payoff for the OL is, right? Is that you get these younger guys in their rookie contracts that are getting together and you can afford to pay more than one of them when they get to be 5-year guys.
Well, yeah, but Cliff, the problem is that John Michael Schmitz is out at center, and that's forced Bredesen out of position that has moved all sorts of pieces around. So that's been the problem,
Right. So that's my whole question: is what the hell do you do?
Cliff, you know what you do, and thanks for the call. You get John Michael Schmitz healthy and back on the field. That's I don't know I don't have a better answer for you.
Yeah.
Until then, you put Bredesen at center, and look, you can't at this point. You're not at the point of the season, Paul. Say, just play the young guys even if they're not as good. You gotta, especially if Daniel's still not ready to go this week. You gotta protect Tyrod.
Yeah, no doubt.
You have to.
No doubt. Look, my dad asked me the other day. He goes, well, what about it? I said, look, things will be better when Schmitz and Thomas are able to get back into the lineup. That's just common sense. I mean, Schmitz looked like he was off to a hell of a start, and Thomas was second-team All-Pro. Right. Those guys are not just guys; they're really good.
And the Schmitz issue is twofold in that you then lose Bredesen at guard, and he is playing out of position.
No doubt.
So.
No doubt.
All right, final call of the show is Doug and Glen Falls. He'll wrap us up. Hi, Doug.
Hi, John. Actually, this is more about the quarterback that's supposed to be such a great quarterback. And I wanted to talk to Howard yesterday, but I couldn't get in. That Williams kid from USC.
Yeah, what about Caleb Williams?
I think he's overrated because I think that, and probably Howard would agree with me, that Notre Dame's defense is a young and up-and-coming defense, but that Watts kid, he picked his pocket twice, and I don't think that kid is that good at reading defenses.
Doug, I would not
And
take too
he's
much
gonna
out
be a
of
top 5 pick.
Caleb Williams. Is
we
Doug.
don't go and pick him
Doug.
He looks like a guy, and probably John. You remember? Not John. Paul, you remember this guy? I think his name was Marcus Russell out of Ellis.
Oh my
Jamarcus
gosh,
Russell.
Jamarcus
No,
Russell.
he thought it
Doug,
was all
stop,
that.
stop.
They're
Doug,
not the
stop.
same.
Doug,
Didn't
please
start
stop.
ever.
They're
Doug,
not
Doug,
the same.
stop.
Didn't
Doug,
start for long
Doug,
in
please
the
stop.
NFL, but
Doug, please
that's all
stop.
I got.
Okay, thank you, Doug. But no, he is not Jamarcus Russell.
By the way, that
do not scout off of one game.
the USC Notre Dame game was a fun one to watch.
And
That was a fun game.
people have to understand USC's talent is not very good.
Mm-hmm.
They do not have a good. The defense is terrible. They do not have a very good offensive line. And have you heard about any wide receivers from USC that are going to go high in the draft? Nope. That is Caleb Williams putting that team on his back. And they played a legitimately good Notre Dame team that's coached well defensively. And you saw that. Did Caleb Williams play well in the game? Absolutely not. He did not play
He did
well.
not.
But there is a talent deficiency between those two teams that I think showed up there. And please do not judge Caleb Williams off of one game against a really good defense.
The Irish
Watch him
were desperate for that game too.
Watch him over
Desperate.
the course of the last 2 years, and he's not overrated. He's very, 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 very good. And so is Drake May, by the way, the quarterback of North Carolina. He's also very good.
May I've heard a lot about. You know, if you really wanted to just cut on Williams for the heck of it,
Do you want to do one more, Dom? We
if
could
you
squeeze
wanted
it
to,
in.
the only thing you could say is Carson Palmer is the only USC quarterback who's ever amounted to anything. If you really wanted to
Yeah,
cut
but
up on USC,
you don't want to
But that's not
right.
But that's not a direct shot at Williams. It would be a shot at the Trojans.
Yeah, and if you did that last year, you wouldn't have drafted C.J. Stroud. He's the Ohio State quarterback history, and he's had a pretty darn good first few weeks.
he's done okay.
Yeah, he's been pretty
Done
good.
okay. Yeah.
So, by the way, if you're interested, you want to, get into the draft stuff, Tony Pauline and I tune into draft season. It's up there. We just put up our episode this morning, actually. Last week we did running backs and wide receivers. This week we did tight ends and quarterbacks. So we're kind of going through the positions here every week. If you want to keep up on the draft stuff, we do it every week. So tune in. And this is a deep quarterback class. Again, not that I think that is reflective of where the Giants are going to be looking this year necessarily. But you have the two guys at the top, and then you could have another 4 or 5 or 6 guys go in the first few rounds. Like, there's a very deep class. Maybe not maybe one more first-round pick, depending on what you think of Michael Penix out of Washington and Sanders. If he comes out of Colorado, they say he's going back. We'll see. But, guys like Bo Nix, you have the kid out of Duke that's supposed to be pretty good.
The Oregon-Washington game was fun, too, the other
That
day.
was a really fun
That was
football
another
game.
fun game to watch.
You have Quinn Ewers out of Texas, who a lot of people think could be a late first-round pick. So you have and I'll tell you what, that Oregon and Washington game, you have a lot of skill position players. That Oregon running back, he's a little undersized, but he's gonna be a good player. A couple of receivers for Washington, and then you have the what's his last name? The tall speedster for Oregon, who is like 6'3" and he can run. He's very good. So Rome Odunze, the wide receiver for Washington. So there was a lot of good offensive players. I'm not sure how many defensive guys were in that game, but you have a lot of good offensive players in that game for those two teams for Oregon and Washington that are going to be pretty good players.
It's going to be a lot of fun looking at this draft.
But we're not there yet.
No, I'm not there.
We're not there.
You are started, but I'm not there.
Well,
yet.
I have to be.
You have
I'm
to
doing a
because Tony
podcast every week.
Tony tells you have to.
Well, Tony's so on top of things. He sends me spreadsheets of like top 50s in each position. I'm like,
he's a crazy man, Tony.
What I do each week, and this is my process, I try to watch, since I'm not traveling anymore, it allows me to watch a little bit more on Saturdays. So I try to pick out 1, maybe 2 games on a Saturday that I usually can't see them live, but I'll go through them on the DVR at night and try to watch them.
Okay.
And then for 2 hours on Wednesday morning, me and Tony record draft season every Tuesday, at 11 a.m. I take Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Okay.
And I'll watch guys. And I'll try to get through a half dozen or so guys each morning in those 2 hours.
He's watching
if I
60
can.
guys.
That's what he does.
He's insane.
Depending on what we're doing that week,
We love Tony.
Based on position, I'll try to get through a few guys. And this is not watching full games. It's watching 3 dozen plays from each guys just to try to get a feel for the guys and what they do.
Right.
And that's how I'm trying to at least keep up a little bit over the course of the year. This week's going to be tough because we're doing offensive line this upcoming week. And it's hard to just do a few dozen plays on offensive line
Very
and
hard.
get a feel for them.
I know what that's like.
So There'll be a lot of Tony next week doing the offensive line, and maybe I'll bring on a guest too, and we'll do some offensive line next week on draft season. But go check that out. Just search for draft season on your favorite podcast platform. I'm back with Casillas tomorrow. We'll do a lot more Commanders talk and Commanders preview on Big Blue Kickoff Live tomorrow at 12:30, and then Paul Lance will be with you on Friday as well. So make sure you check that out. For Paul Dottino, I'm John Trunk. Thanks for joining us on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. We'll see you tomorrow.